Heyo, Mont here, and I was in the midst of working on videos about Leeroy, Patches, Nito and Beatrice when a huge influx of Dark Souls 2 information came out from Japan, and you've probably seen some videos on the stuff. I'm not gonna show any of that footage or even the pictures from it, and I'm not gonna talk too much about the new gameplay, but believe me, I'm super excited by all that. Nah, I'm gonna talk about something else that's come out of all this, the lore implications. There's a huge list of translated item descriptions that, well, it's like Christmas for a Dark Souls fan who's into the lore. So that's what we're going to talk about today, our first proper glimpse into Dark Souls 2. Well, the story at least. A chance to make some speculation before the game comes out and see how it stands up when the game is out. You've probably realised that, as we don't know any real characters from Dark Souls 2 yet, I've just gone and used Comfy Mont for the thumbnail art. Then again, I've been calling that guy Comfy Knight since the first trailer, which was, back at the VGAs, and a lot of people have been calling him that. Only, now we have the Temple Knight, who's even more comfy looking. I mean, he doesn't just have the comfy collar, he has like huge comfy fluffy robes and everything. So I guess he's like the elite Comfy Knight. That's enough talk of comfy, let's start. So let's get going, and we'll start with the spell descriptions before moving on to items. It goes without saying, if you want to keep your Dark Souls 2 experience 100% fresh for when you play the game, stop watching now. I'll be talking about item descriptions and spell descriptions and probably not much in the way of plot or gameplay spoilers, but I know some people like to know nothing about a game when they're going into it. So, that warning out of the way, let's go. And let's start with a new class of magic. We all know Pyromancy and Soul Sorcery, which both seem to be developed by the intelligence stat now. And we know miracles which are determined by faith. But now we have a new class of magic, Hexes. These seem to be faith-based and have some very interesting descriptions. Let's take this one for example. It is said that hexes originated as a form of sorcery. However, they were claimed to pervert the nature of life, and now hexes are forbidden in most countries. Pervert the nature of life, and they originated as sorcery. Could this be dark magic? We know that this is some kind of physical magic. We know dark magic was physical magic, and it seemed to be based off humanity and manipulating humanity, as opposed to the soul arts, which are based off presumably manipulating the power of one's soul, such as, soul arrow, soul spear, etc, etc. How interesting. Then we have a sorcery that attacks foes using a sword made of souls. The sorcery has been strengthened by concentrating power in the user's hands. Use of this sorcery is not too dissimilar to swordplay, making it popular with the magic warriors of Melfia. The main reason I bring this up is because it's our first look at a new place, a new land. Melfia. Melfia? I'm not really sure how you're going to pronounce that, assuming it's even translated properly. So then we have an ancient miracle, said to have been passed down by an ancient warrior in the service of the Princess of Sunlight before his death. An ancient warrior in the service of the Princess of Sunlight. It's a miracle that boosts attack and defense for the caster and allies nearby. So it's quite a bit like soothing sunlight and all that. But just who was the warrior? The Princess of Sunlight is most certainly Guinevere. But was the warrior merely someone in the Princess Guard Covenant? Or was it one of Guinevere's more famous guards, like, say, Ornstein? Who knows? Then, a miracle that launches a giant spear of lightning. This miracle came into the possession of the Melfian clergy through ancient lore. Little is understood about the source of its power. Perhaps this miracle belonged to some long-forgotten hero. Another reference to Melfia. A giant spear of lightning. Some long-forgotten hero. Now, this could be referencing one of three people, most likely. Gwyn, his firstborn, or Solaire. And this is our first real indication that Dark Souls 2 takes place long after Dark Souls 1. How long? Well, considering that in Dark Souls 1 they still know about Gwyn, but stuff is starting to fade into obscurity and people were not sure what's going on. Well, let's assume that the DLC takes place in year 1. That's, when you fight Artorias and Manus. then the main game is, say, year 301, 300 years later. Dark Souls 2, by my estimate, would take place in, say, year 801. That, obviously, that's just a really rough estimate, but because you can see, obviously, we know that the technology hasn't advanced all that much, but the world seems to be in a very different place. Could it be that the ending of Dark Souls 1 helped fade and obscure history further? But which ending was the canon ending? Was the Fade the Fire, Link the Fire, or the Dark Lord ending? Which one are we going into Dark Souls 2 with? Or are we going into both? Who knows? Then we have, next up, summons a whip of flame in front of the user. Though commonly used by the pyromancer soldiers of Drangleic, few truly mastered this pyromancy, as its short range required practiced maneuvering by the user. Not much to note here, that's basically the, what's that spell from, I think it's in Demon Souls and Dark Souls, but whatever. More interesting though is the Drangleic. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. It could be Drangleic or Drangleic. It seems to be a Germany type word, but I'm not too sure about that. But yeah, Drangleic and Pyromancer soldiers. I wonder if this has any relation to the Great Swamp area mentioned in the first game. Anyway, next we've got, it's unknown who created the first pyromancy, but ancient pyromancies such as this are being passed on by an unknown practitioner of the art to this day. More evidence that Dark Souls 2 takes place long after the first game, because we more or less know that Katana essentially invented pyromancy, right? You have the Witch of Izalith, but then Katana seems to be the one who was being the first real practitioner of it. Maybe she is the one passing it down. It says, these pyromancies are being passed on by an unknown practitioner of the art to this day. However, it could be her, but she seemed to be very selective with who she would, teach. She taught, what's he, Solomon? It's completely gone right now from my head, but I'm pretty sure it was Salomon, like a salamander. But yeah, that about does it for spells, so let's move on to the items, shall we? First up we have a ring. These rings were granted to warriors who distinguished themselves in the service of King Vendrick. The king favoured noble warriors who staked every battle on their strength alone. So we've got our first reference to characters here, King Vendrick. Sounds like a hero king or warrior king, no? But we'll be hearing more about him very soon. Moving on. A high level of artistry is required to place all 4 gemstones in one ring and draw out their power. Only the lost knowledge of the ruined land of Ulifi could have enabled the production of this ring. Not much to note here other than our first mention of Ulifi. I'm not really sure how that's pronounced, but I would say Ulifi based on the spelling. Sounds a bit like Ulasil, doesn't it? I suppose that's just a coincidence though. Next up, we've got another ring. In the sacred land of Lindelt, it was said that as long as House Osteria held this ring, the peace and safety of the people would be assured. Lindelt and Osteria. Osteria. Ostrava. Again, that's probably just stretching a coincidence there. Osteria sounds quite a bit like austerity too, which is a real word. But yeah, it's probably just coincidence that Osteria made me think of Ostrava. But it's nice that we're getting some names and places to think over, for sure. The Undead Hunts during the reign of the Iron King took place in this forest, and the cells in which the undead were held still stand there to this day. However, the march of time has eroded any difference between the captors and the captives. Now, this is very interesting. We know that undead hunts were happening in Dark Souls 1. Knights and clerics would hunt them using Lloyd's talismans and the like. Could this be referencing the undead hunts from Dark Souls 1 era? And who's the Iron King? Nobody from Dark Souls 1, surely. I mean, there's Iron Tarkus, but he's not a king as far as we know. That is a pretty badass sounding name though, the Iron King. Could that be the same king as Vendrick, Is King Vendrick the Iron King, or is it someone else? Next up we have an effigy formed from a lump of an unknown black material. It is surprisingly warm and strangely soft to the touch. Use this item to reverse hollowing. When gazing closely at the effigy, one starts to perceive a human's appearance. It is said that the appearance you see is your own true form. Oh, warm and soft, just like the soul of Manus. Also, hollowing is not a binary state in Dark Souls 2. When you die, you lose some of your health, and when you die again, you lose a bit more. You can limit this with a ring, and you can reverse the effect using this effigy item. That is a lot more lore friendly than the binary hollowing in Dark Souls 1. That is to say, in Dark Souls 1, you would die, then you're hollow. You die again, you're still hollow. You know what I mean? That is binary. There's on and off, basically. But as I mentioned in the Siegmeyer video, hollowing seems to be a gradual process. So I much prefer this new way of slowly losing more and more of your overall health. It makes a lot more sense to me. Oh yeah, and you can be invaded when hollow in Dark Souls 2. Which is pretty cool, but I know a lot of people are really angry about that. But hey, doesn't really bother me, to be honest. Bring it on. And here we have another returning thing from Dark Souls 1. An accursed mar. Use its power to return to the last bonfire rested at the cost of all souls held. Like a moth drawn to a flame, those branded with the dark sign are fated to be consumed by fire over and over and over again. This is the only fate permitted to them. How very interesting. Like a moth drawn to a flame. Lautrec exclaims that when we invade him in Anor Londo. And could that consumed by fire part have anything to do with the Link the Fire ending? I wonder. Next up we've got helmet blessed by the Wargod. Wargod? Wargod? The War God Faram. This helmet is in the style of the Lion Knights, a once mighty order from Ferosa, or Ferosa, not sure how you're going to say that. Although the Lion Knights wore heavy armour, they were feared for their nimble two-handed swordplay. So, you've all seen the Comfy Knight from the trailers and box art and so forth. What do you think? Is that the Lion Knight? Is he wearing Lion Knight armour? I'm thinking it is, but I could well be wrong. Ferosa, or Ferosa. I prefer Ferosa, another new place. We also get a name for a war god. How interesting. Because Gwyn's firstborn was the god of war, as stated in Dark Souls 1, and now we have another the war god. Does it mean it's the same god? No, I don't think so. Just they don't know about Gwyn's firstborn. All the old mythology seems to be gone, and they have a whole new set of gods. Or the old gods have new names. Who knows? But who is this new god? Where did it come from? Considering gods in Dark Souls can seemingly be, men. Just normal men who then have supremely powerful souls. As in, a normal man can ascend to godhood. Robes worn by the Silver Drake Knights of Lindelt. Though little is truly known about the order, it is said that their well-honed miracles and unwavering loyalty in the face of death made Lindelt worthy rivals to Drangleic in their day. I would bet good money that this item is talking about the Temple Knight's armour. For starters, we know they are robes worn by knights, and the Temple Knight is wearing a heavy robe, which looks very comfy. Lindelt. We heard that earlier. House Osteria is from Lindelt. And we know they are home to Silver Drake Knights, who are rivals to Drangleic, who have Pyromancer soldiers. Also, Silver Drake Knights? Think about it. People in Dark Souls 1 hunted the dragons, and now we have knights who are taking drakes as their what? Their sigil? Their namesake? It isn't that they've passed so long out of mind and memory, because we know that Dragonkin are in Dark Souls 2. So what could this mean? It's set long after Dark Souls 1, but dragons are still present? Robe worn by the great sorcerer Strayed. Strayed was Strayed was a sworn brother-in-arms of the ancient king of Old Ulithi. Together they slew the ancient dragon, and tasted omniscience. However, even the renowned wisdom of Ulithi was not enough to control the peculiar magic birthed by his arts. Strayed and another king. The ancient dragon. More reference to dragons, but who is the ancient dragon? Surely not the everlasting one from Ash Lake? But what's more interesting is this. They tasted omniscience. Did they simply experience a power rush from killing a powerful dragon? Or did killing the dragon grant them some powers? And what peculiar magic is it referencing? And was it this magic that led Ulithi to destruction? But here we have something very interesting. A commonplace leather hat with a feather, favoured by hunters skilled with a bow. This hat was based on the one worn by a folkloric master archer whose name is now lost to time. Faris. Lost to time. Just more evidence of the timeline that Dark Souls 2 takes place long after Dark Souls 1, stating the obvious. Next up we've got crude iron armour worn by the hollowed thieves who wander the lands of Drangleic. Well, does this mean that we are in Drangleic? Or have they just wandered to wherever Dark Souls 2 is set? Maybe, but this is some good evidence that Dark Souls 2 might be set in Drangleic, the land of pyromancy soldiers whose troops also favour fire arrows. Failing that, it means Drangleic is one area we visit, and we will visit more than one country or region. Considering the game is supposed to be twice the size of Dark Souls 1, and we know there's a foresty area and much of the game is by a coast, more and more questions are being raised. But next we've got black garments such as these were a mark of the palace sorcerers. Perhaps in life, the wearer was a sly old creature of the court who used his arts to resist foreign threats. How very interesting. But what court is this, Drangleic? If so, why would they have foreign threats? I mean, everyone's gonna have foreign threats, but any reason in particular? Maybe because they hold the secrets to pyromancy? Something desired by other nations? We have to remember that sorcery and pyromancy seem to be a lot closer together in Dark Souls 2. Maybe they're even taught at the same places, who knows? Anyway, a traditional Drangleic helmet granted only to knights whose loyalty was recognised by the king. Vendrick was a just king. He gave high-ranking appointments to knights who demonstrated both valour and charity and helped lead his country to prosperity. This equipment is evidence of his great feats. Well now, so Vendrick was king of Drangleic. This could be the poster character armour, assuming it isn't the Lion Knight stuff. But more and more we have evidence the game is set in Drangleic. Maybe we'll meet King Vendrick. Maybe we'll all get soul-sucked by him. Robes worn by tiny Gren, blessed with the protection of the war god Na Alma. These robes are much heavier than they look, weighed down as they are by the blood they have imbibed. Gren? And what's this? Another war god? There isn't but one? Na Alma and Faram. Maybe they're opposed to each other, one aligned to good, one to evil, one to fire, one to dark. Fun fact, Alma can have a meaning of feeds the soul. And that's it for armor, so let's move on to the final segment. Weapons. Everyone's favourite part. Well, mine at least. Halberd used by the Dragon Riders, the retinue of the king. Though otherwise traditional in design, these halberds are particularly heavy. So, this one little description has more lore implications than, like, I don't know, a wedding between Manus's diseased hand and Gwyn's fuzzy beard. Dragon Riders, like dragoons? Just what king could possibly have dragons under his command? Or is that merely a title? And if it's Vendrick, do you remember that vaguely Anor Londo / painted world looking place in the footage we've seen? dragons or wyverns or drakes guarding a bridge that leads to an island fortress? Could that be the domain of this king who hosts even the mighty dragons? And then there's that building with the undead dragon that collapses near on the player trying to crush him. Have there been experiments going on? Has the king raised the dragons from the past and bound them to his will? If that's the case, did they break free and lead his kingdom into ruin? Could that be the reason there are foreign threats to Drangleic? Maybe Vendrick and his pyromancers discovered a way to resurrect dragons? Who can say? Sacred bell used by an order of knights, catalysts for miracles and hexes. Though little is truly known about the order, it is said their well-honed miracles and unwavering loyalty in the face of death made them worthy rivals to this country in their day. For starters, this confirms that hexes are most likely faith-based, and this also might well confirm Drangleic being the game world because it says, this country, or at least part of the game world. Earlier we spoke about how these temple knights seem to be rivals of Drangleic. Well, fits the description of this pretty well. I'm intrigued more and more. So, next up is a certain man's favourite great shield. Forged by layering thin sheets of iron, it provides excellent defence for its weight. Perhaps you'll learn more about the original owner when next you meet. Now, this is very interesting. Assuming we meet the original owner, why would he abandon his favourite great shield? Unless he replaced it with another? This is such a vague and curious description, typical of Dark Souls. I wonder if it will be changed in the final game, or when and if we find the original owner, will he be friend or foe? And what would he make of us wielding his favourite shield? Greatsword belonging to a man known as the Pursuer, not to be mistaken with the spell Pursuers, or is it? Known as the mightiest of the straight swords, it also asks great strength and dexterity of its wielder. This sword was held one-handed by its previous owner, but now is not the time to discuss him. Could the Pursuer be the same man who had his favourite great shield? And why is now not the time to discuss him? Is that placeholder text, or is there... Maybe now isn't the time to discuss him, but I'm so curious all the same. Could it be the man with the awesome cape who guards the frog gate to the chariot boss? Who knows? But finally we have this. Katana, used by the Inquisitors. Though there is no secret to the manner of its forging, the katana's hefty blade glistens with extraordinary sharpness. Perhaps its great weight portends to the great washes of blood it has supped upon. Katana used by Inquisitors. What does that remind you of? Inquisitors, to me, makes me think Velka. Why would they have come to Drangleic? Or could it be they were from this land, assuming it is Drangleic? Either way, what were they doing? Why is everyone so interested in this land of Drangleic? Just what has King Vendrick done? Why and how are the dragons back? I think it's safe to say King Vendrick might be a very important figure. Maybe he's as important as Alant. Is it Alant or Alant? I should say Alant for various reasons, but we're gonna have to wait until March 2014 before we can even hope to analyse this in more depth and get some answers. Until then, have fun. Tell me what you think in the comments. What is Drangleic? Is Drangleic the game mode? Who is Vendrick gonna be? Are we gonna fight Vendrick? Who are the Temple Knights? Why are they in Drangleic? Why are there so many questions? Maybe we can work some truth out of this in the comments, because, you know, 2 brains are better than 1, and like 1,000 brains are better than 2. But let's see what we can come up with before we get the game in our hands to search for some more answers. Until then, see you later.